Focus on yourself and stay silent. Watch how life changes. There comes a time in life when the noise gets so loud, the opinions, the criticism, the expectations, the demands. And if you're not careful, you'll begin to think that who you are is what others say you are. But let me tell you something. There is a voice greater than every voice in this world, a whisper that doesn't shout, a spirit that doesn't force. But oh, when you hear it, when you finally hear that still small voice, you know, this is the voice I've been waiting for all my life. There is a mystery in silence that most people miss because they are too busy trying to be heard. In our world today, silence is often mistaken for weakness, for passivity, for the absence of power. But in the realm of the spirit, silence is often the very womb of transformation. When you quiet your mouth, when you quiet your mind, when you quiet the noise around you, something begins to happen deep within the soul. There in the hush, God begins to work in ways you cannot see, and often cannot understand. We live in a world of constant noise, voices from every direction, opinions from all angles, distractions without end. People speak without thinking, respond without praying, and react without waiting. Yet the Spirit of God does not compete with that noise. He does not shout to be heard, he waits. He waits until the heart is still, until the mind has surrendered, until the soul has let go of its striving. Then he speaks, not through thunder, not through the earthquake, not even through the fire, but through that still, small voice that you can only hear when you are silent enough to receive it. It is in that silence that transformation begins. Not the kind that others can measure on the outside, but the deep, soul-level transformation that rewrites your identity, refines your desires, and renews your mind. In the quiet, the Spirit begins to reveal things about you that you didn't even know were there. He brings to light your fears, your hidden motives, your secret wounds, your unresolved battles. He does not expose them to shame you, he reveals them to heal you. But that healing, that divine surgery requires stillness. It requires silence. It requires you to stop trying to fix yourself and allow him to do what only he can do. So many people run from silence because they are afraid of what they will hear in it. They are afraid of the loneliness, afraid of the buried pain, afraid of the emptiness that might surface when everything else is stripped away. But the truth is, that emptiness is not a punishment, it's an invitation. It is in that sacred emptiness that the Spirit begins to fill you. Not with more opinions, not with more noise, but with himself. He does not rush, he is never in a hurry, and in that stillness he begins to reform you. The thoughts you once had are slowly replaced by his thoughts. The feelings that once consumed you are quieted by his peace. The restlessness of your soul is settled, not by an answer but by his presence. You cannot fake this process. You cannot rush it. You cannot perform your way into spiritual transformation. You must simply come and be still. You must bring your weary, wandering, wounded heart before him and let the silence do its work. The silence is not empty. It is full of purpose. It is full of him. And when you allow yourself to sit in that silence, without the need to speak, without the need to explain, without the need to defend yourself, you begin to notice something. The things that used to bother you don't bother you anymore. The words that used to sting now pass over you like wind. The need to be seen, to be approved of, to be applauded, loses its grip on you. Something stronger, something more eternal has taken root in your soul. There is a quiet power in turning your attention inward, in focusing on yourself, not with selfishness but with sacred responsibility. Most people spend their energy watching others, comparing, criticizing, measuring their worth against someone else's success or failure. But when your eyes are always on the outside, your heart becomes neglected. You start to drift slowly, quietly, away from your center, and before long you forget who you are. You forget what truly matters. You lose touch with your purpose, and in that disconnection, confusion and frustration begin to grow. Focusing on yourself is not about ignoring others. It's about finally being honest with where you are, who you are, and what God is doing in you. It is about no longer pointing fingers outward, but looking inward with humility and hunger. It is easy to notice what others should change. It takes discipline and courage to ask, what in me needs to change? When you stop trying to control others, and stop worrying about how you're being perceived, something shifts. You begin to notice the quiet whispers of your own heart. You start to see the patterns you've been repeating. You feel the areas that are still wounded, the parts of you that need healing. Not from the world, but from God himself. When you focus on yourself, your spiritual eyes begin to open. You become aware of how often you've been running from pain, from stillness, from truth. You realize how quickly you react when someone offends you, how much you seek validation in other people's words. But in that awareness, there is an invitation to grow, to deepen, to return to the secret place where transformation begins. Because spiritual growth never happens by accident. It begins with intention, with attention, with silence, and with surrender. When you stop watching others, when you stop trying to be what everyone expects you to be, you become free to become what you were created to be. There is so much strength in owning your story, every mistake, every weakness, every question you still don't have the answer to. But instead of hiding those things or fixing them to please others, you bring them into the light of God's presence. And in that place, healing begins. The kind of healing that doesn't just make you feel better for a moment, but the kind that rebuilds your foundation from the inside out. Focusing on yourself means noticing your own reactions, your thoughts, your feelings, not to judge them harshly, but to understand what is shaping you. What you meditate on is shaping you. What you believe about yourself, about God, about others, it is shaping your choices, your relationships, your peace. If you never stop to examine it, you'll keep living from a place of reaction instead of reflection. You'll keep circling the same mountains, wrestling the same fears, living the same patterns. But when you shift your gaze inward, you slow down. You begin to notice where you're tense, where you're bitter, where you're still holding on to what you should have released long ago. You learn to listen, to yourself, to God, to what your life is quietly trying to teach you. And in that listening, wisdom grows. Not loud wisdom, not the kind that needs a stage, but the quiet kind that changes your direction without needing to prove anything to anyone. That is where the real work is done, in the secret place, in the quiet spaces of the soul, where no one else can see, and only you and God know the depth of what is being transformed. Focusing on yourself is not an act of pride. It is an act of surrender. It is the decision to stop blaming the outside world for your inner condition. It is choosing to own your healing, your peace, your growth, and to make space for God to do what only He can do within you. You don't need to explain yourself to everyone. There is a quiet strength in being misunderstood and choosing not to defend your name. In the depths of the soul, there is a place where only God truly sees, where only He understands the full story. People see fragments, moments taken out of context, words misheard, actions misinterpreted. But God sees the heart. He sees the struggle behind the silence, the tears behind the smile, the motive behind the action. And when you know that, when you live from that awareness, you become less concerned with proving yourself and more concerned with being true to the work God is doing in you. Explaining yourself over and over drains your spirit. It invites unnecessary noise into your life, and it pulls you out of the peace God has given you. Every time you try to convince someone of your heart, your intent, your truth, you are stepping away from the sacred place of surrender. You cannot control how people see you. You cannot force understanding. You can only walk in integrity, stay close to the voice of the Spirit, and trust that God is your witness. And when you know He sees, that becomes enough. There's a deep maturity that comes when you realize you don't need to correct every misunderstanding. You don't need to chase every rumor. You don't need to respond to every accusation or clear up every confusion. The more spiritually mature you become, the more silent you are in the face of noise, because silence doesn't mean defeat. Silence doesn't mean agreement. Sometimes silence is your offering to God. It is your way of saying, I trust you to speak for me in ways I never could. There are moments when defending yourself actually delays your growth. When you keep trying to explain your heart, you keep revisiting wounds that need to close. You keep reopening situations that God is trying to heal. Not every person is meant to understand you. Not every relationship is meant to be restored. And not every battle is yours to fight. Some things are meant to be left in God's hands because He sees what no one else can. He knows what is being built in you through that very misunderstanding. He knows what kind of endurance, what kind of humility, what kind of fire-tested character is being forged when you choose silence instead of self-defense. When Jesus stood before His accusers, He didn't argue, He didn't explain Himself. He stood in silence, not out of weakness, but out of divine strength. He knew the Father saw. He knew the truth would speak in time. And if the Son of God could be misunderstood and still remain silent, so can you. Not everything needs a response. Not every injustice needs your explanation. Sometimes your silence is louder than any defense. Sometimes your silence is your protection. It is your sanctuary. And while the world rushes to clarify, justify, and prove, you are invited into a different way, a quieter way, a sacred trust that says, let them think what they will. I know who I am in God. That is where peace begins to rise in you. Not the peace the world gives, but the deep, holy peace that surpasses understanding. It does not depend on your reputation. It does not rise and fall with the approval of others. It is anchored in knowing that the one who formed your heart also defends it. When you stop explaining yourself, you create space. Space for God to move. Space for truth to stand on its own. space for healing to take root without interference. And in that space you grow. You become stronger, quieter, more grounded. Not needing to be seen, not needing to be heard, just needing to be faithful. You live not for the applause of people, but for the whisper of the Spirit saying, "Well done." There is a kind of strength that cannot be seen with the eyes. It is not loud. It does not come with fanfare. It is not about how much you say or how many battles you win in the eyes of others. It is the strength of being still and letting God fight for you. There is something powerful that happens when you stop trying to fix everything on your own, when you stop trying to prove your point, to push your way through, to make things happen in your own timing. There is a sacred kind of rest that only comes when you truly let go and trust that God sees what you cannot see and knows what you do not know. When you are still, when you take your hands off the situation, you are not doing nothing. You are doing the hardest thing of all. You are surrendering. You are admitting that you cannot carry this on your own. You are choosing faith over fear and silence over striving. You are trusting that God is not just watching, He is actively working on your behalf. He is going ahead of you. He is dealing with things behind the scenes that you may never be aware of. He is shifting hearts, opening doors, closing others, and orchestrating details that are far beyond your reach. But you cannot see that when you are busy trying to take control. You cannot hear His voice when your own voice is too loud. There is a discipline in being still. It requires you to resist the urge to react, to retaliate, to respond out of emotion. It means not rushing to post the angry words, not picking up the phone to explain yourself, not stepping into the chaos just to prove a point. Stillness is not weakness. It is not passivity. It is not indifference. It is choosing to anchor yourself in the truth that God is faithful, that He is just, and that He sees what is happening even when others do not. There are battles that are not meant to be fought with words or actions. They are meant to be fought in the quiet place of prayer, in the secret place where no one else sees. There, in that sacred stillness, you cry out and God hears you. There you bring your hurt, your confusion, your desire to act, and you lay it all down, and in return He gives you peace, not always answers, not always instant results, but peace that holds you in the waiting, in the silence, in the not knowing. Letting God fight your battles is not about walking away, it's about walking differently. It's about choosing a path that may look foolish to the world, but is deeply rooted in wisdom. It's about knowing that revenge and vindication are never as sweet as peace. It's about learning to rest in the assurance that what God has for you cannot be stolen, blocked, or denied by anyone. And if He is for you, no one can truly stand against you. Stillness is the space where your faith grows. It's the place where you stop striving and start trusting. Where your prayers are no longer frantic cries for help, but quiet confessions of confidence. I don't need to fix this. I don't need to figure it all out. I don't need to fight this in my flesh. God, you see, you know, and I trust you. That becomes your posture. That becomes your strength. And from that stillness you move, not in haste, not in fear, but in alignment with His timing and His will. Because when you let God fight for you, He does more in a moment than you could do in a lifetime. You don't need the applause of others to validate your purpose. You don't need the spotlight to prove your worth. When your identity is rooted in being seen, you will constantly chase approval, constantly feel the pressure to perform, to please, to be what others expect. But when your identity is grounded in who you are before God, you can move in quiet confidence, even when no one is watching. There is a deep kind of peace that comes when you no longer live for validation. It frees you from the exhausting cycle of trying to meet everyone's expectations, of constantly measuring yourself against the opinions of others. The desire to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be affirmed, it's a natural human longing. But when that desire becomes the driving force behind your actions, it will always leave you empty. Applause fades. Praise is fickle. People's opinions shift with seasons, with moods, with their own wounds and perceptions. You cannot anchor your soul in something so unstable. You cannot build your peace on a foundation that crumbles the moment someone misunderstands you or fails to notice what you've done. The more you need to be seen, the more you become a prisoner to the eyes of others. There is something sacred about serving, growing, healing, and obeying in silence. When you do what is right, not because someone is watching, but because it is what honors God, something shifts in you. You begin to find joy in the hidden places. You begin to see the value in obscurity. Not because you're hiding, but because you're being refined. There is a kind of growth that only happens in the unseen places. When no one is clapping for you, when no one is posting your name, when no one is giving you a platform, that is when God is shaping the kind of character that can carry true purpose. You don't need to be validated by the world when you've already been chosen by God. His hand on your life is not determined by likes, shares, or recognition. His calling is not based on popularity. It is based on His love, His will, and His plan. And when you really understand that, you stop striving to be known and you start seeking to be faithful. Because faithfulness is not always flashy. It's quiet. It's consistent. It shows up when no one else does. It continues even when no one is clapping. That is the kind of life that pleases God. A life not built on being seen, but on being surrendered. There will always be people who overlook you. There will always be seasons when your work, your growth, your transformation goes unnoticed. But those are not the seasons to despair. They are the seasons to dig deeper, to go inward, to strengthen your roots. Because when your roots are deep, you can withstand any storm. When your roots are grounded in the truth of who God says you are no longer shaken by rejection. You are no longer moved by whether someone approves or acknowledges you. You begin to live from a place of internal security, not external affirmation. This doesn't mean you don't value encouragement. It doesn't mean affirmation isn't meaningful. It simply means it's no longer your source. You are no longer driven by the need to be seen, because you know you are already fully known. You are no longer striving for attention, because you have already been found by the one who created you. And in that place, in that quiet, sacred confidence, you begin to thrive, not because of who notices you, but because of who holds you. You begin to walk with a freedom that the world cannot offer, a freedom that only comes when you stop chasing validation and start living in truth. There is a hidden place where real growth happens, and it's not on stages or in public applause. It's not when others are watching or praising or complimenting you. Real growth happens in silence, in solitude, in surrender. It happens in the quiet moments when no one sees the tears you cry, when no one hears the prayers you whisper. It happens in the nights when your heart is aching and you're still saying, "Yes, Lord." It happens in the decision to keep going, even when the path is unclear, even when you feel unseen, even when the soil feels dry and progress seems invisible. Growth is not always loud. It doesn't always look like success. Sometimes it looks like silence, like obedience, like waiting, like saying no to distraction so you can say yes to depth. In a world that celebrates performance and constant visibility, it can feel almost unnatural to slow down, to go inward, to allow yourself to grow quietly. But the greatest transformations often happen where no one else can see them. Like roots spreading deep beneath the surface, like seeds breaking open in the darkness of the earth, your soul grows strongest when it is hidden. There is purpose in the hidden seasons. There is divine design in the seasons where it seems nothing is happening. Those are the seasons when your character is being formed, when your trust is being tested, when your faith is maturing beyond emotion and excitement. That is when God begins to shape you, not for popularity but for permanence. Not for moments, but for legacy. He is not interested in building something shallow and quick. He is interested in building something deep and lasting, and deep things take time. In the hidden places, God deals with things no one else can see. Your motives, your insecurities, your fears, your pride. He does not rush the process because rushed growth is fragile. He knows what you need, when you need it, and how to prepare you for what He has prepared for you. But you must be willing to stay in the hidden place long enough for the work to be done. You must stop looking for instant results and start trusting the slow, holy work of becoming. That is not easy, but it is necessary. The pressure to always be seen can rob you of the joy of becoming. When you're always performing, always striving, always curating an image, you miss the quiet invitation to rest in who God is shaping you to be. You miss the gentle whisper that says, "You don't have to rush. I'm still working even here." And if you're not careful, you'll mistake silence for absence. You'll think that because no one notices, nothing is happening. But something is happening. Something holy, something lasting. Every time you choose to grow in secret, you are saying yes to something bigger than yourself. You are agreeing with heaven. You are building depth. You are becoming solid. Because one day what is hidden will be revealed. But it will not be revealed prematurely. God will reveal what He's planted in you when the time is right, when the roots are strong enough to carry the fruit. And when that moment comes, it won't be forced or manipulated or performed. It will be natural, holy, and undeniable. Until then, cherish the hidden places, cherish the silence, cherish the stretching, the pruning, the quiet daily obedience that no one else applauds. That is where the foundation is laid. That is where your strength is formed. That is where you learn to hear the voice of God more clearly, not through the noise of the world, but in the stillness of your own heart. There is a deep and quiet strength in not reacting to everything that tries to provoke you. The world will always offer moments to pull you out of peace, to stir up your emotions, to trigger your fears or insecurities. You will face words that sting, looks that judge, silence that feels like rejection. But not every action deserves a reaction, and not every battle is worth entering. When you reach a certain place of maturity, you begin to understand that responding is not always strength. Sometimes, the greatest display of strength is restraint. Choosing stillness when everything in you wants to speak, choosing grace when offense is knocking at your door. There is a sacred dignity in holding your peace. Not because you're afraid to speak, but because you've learned to value your peace more than your pride. You have learned that not every conversation needs your voice, not every misunderstanding needs your explanation, not every offense deserves your energy. Some things are better left in silence, not out of fear but out of wisdom. You know what it costs to lose your peace, and you have tasted the fruit of patience, the reward of staying grounded when everything around you feels like a storm. It is not that you are unaware or indifferent. It is that you have decided your spirit is too precious to give away to every disturbance that comes your way. When you react quickly, you often respond from the flesh, not from the spirit. Quick reactions are usually born out of pain, pride, or fear. But when you pause, when you breathe, when you wait, you give space for the Spirit of God to lead you. You give room for clarity, for truth, for grace to rise up instead of anger. And in that space, something powerful happens. You grow. You see differently. You realize that most of what once consumed you no longer holds the same power. You are not who you used to be. You don't need to prove yourself in the same ways. You don't need to defend every part of your life. There is freedom in that kind of release. You begin to understand that peace is not passive. It is powerful, it is active. It takes effort to hold it. It takes discipline to protect it. And when you live from a place of peace, you become unshakable. Not because life is easy, but because you are rooted. You are not moved by every opinion, not derailed by every disagreement. You walk differently. You speak differently. You listen more, argue less. You learn to bless even when cursed, to love even when unloved, to keep your hands clean and your heart soft. That is what makes you powerful. Not loudness, but depth. Not dominance, but discernment. There is a kind of spiritual authority that comes when you are not swayed by emotion, but led by the Spirit. You are no longer a slave to every wave that rises. You no longer let every offense shape your mood or shift your direction. You become steady, and in your steadiness, others find safety. In your calm, others begin to feel the quiet strength of the presence of God in you. It is not because you are better. It is because you have learned the value of staying in alignment, of refusing to let temporary emotions guide eternal decisions. This kind of living takes practice. It takes a surrendered heart. It takes choosing over and over again to be still when the moment begs for noise. It takes hearing the voice of God louder than the voice of your emotions. It takes knowing who are and whose you are, so deeply, so securely, that nothing can pull you away from your center. And from that center, you begin to move in wisdom. You begin to discern what is worth your voice and what is better left in God's hands. You must learn the difference between isolation and solitude, because in solitude, something holy takes place. When God pulls you away from the noise, from the constant voices, from the familiar patterns, it can feel like a stripping, a loss, a separation from all that once brought you comfort. But solitude is not punishment. It is preparation. It is the sacred space where He quiets everything around you so you can finally hear what has been buried underneath the distractions. He is not removing you to hurt you. He is setting you apart to speak to you, to heal you, to strengthen the parts of you that could never grow in the noise. There are places in the soul that only silence can reach. There are wounds that cannot be touched by busy schedules or surface relationships. God brings you into solitude so that He can get your attention, so that He can tend to the things you've ignored, the pain you've numbed, the fears you've hidden beneath your roles and responsibilities. Solitude exposes. It reveals where your trust has been misplaced, where your identity has been entangled with external things, where your peace has been borrowed from other people's opinions. It is in solitude that God begins to untangle you. He begins to cut away everything false, everything temporary, everything that has been holding you back from fully knowing Him. And fully knowing yourself in Him, it is a hard process. It is a lonely process. But it is a necessary process. Because you cannot carry your calling into the next season if you are still attached to things that were never meant to go with you. God will not elevate what He has not refined. He will not release what He has not first prepared. And preparation does not always look like promotion. Sometimes it looks like obscurity. Sometimes it looks like sitting in a room by yourself, wondering if anyone remembers your name. Sometimes it looks like showing up day after day with no applause, no recognition, no affirmation, only the quiet presence of God and the whisper of His voice saying, "I'm still with you. In solitude, you learn what sustains you. You learn to draw strength from the spirit, not from the spotlight. You learn to hear God for yourself, not through the noise of others. You learn to sit in the discomfort of waiting, of being hidden, of being still, and it is in that stillness that you begin to change. Not on the outside, but deep within. You begin to let go of the need to be seen. You begin to let go of the fear of being misunderstood. You begin to find a new rhythm, a rhythm of grace, of trust, of intimacy with God that cannot be shaken by circumstances or people. You come to see that solitude is not emptiness. It is fullness. It is the space where God fills what the world could never satisfy. It is where you stop performing and start becoming, where you stop grasping and start resting, where you stop chasing and start receiving. And what you receive in solitude is more valuable than anything the world could give in clarity, wisdom, discernment, peace. You walk out of solitude not weaker but stronger, not broken but whole. Because what God builds in secret is stronger than what the world builds in public. You may not understand the season you're in. You may wonder why doors have closed, why certain people have walked away, why everything feels quiet. But what feels like silence is often God's strategy. What feels like delay is often His mercy. What feels like loss is often His redirection. He is not forgetting you. He is forming you. He is not hiding from you. He is inviting you deeper. He is not holding you back. He is setting you apart for something greater than you can yet imagine. When you stop seeking approval from the world, you begin to experience a freedom that cannot be measured by likes, comments, or applause. Approval is a powerful force, but it is a fragile one. It can lift you up for a moment and then bring you crashing down the next. When your sense of worth depends on what others think, you become a slave to their opinions, forever chasing a moving target that can never satisfy the deepest longings of your heart. But when you stop seeking approval and start seeking truth, something inside you shifts. You begin to live from a place of inner peace and confidence that no one can take away. The world is quick to judge, quick to praise, quick to criticize. It can feel like you are constantly under a spotlight, trying to measure up to standards that keep changing. But the truth is, your value does not come from the crowd. Your worth is not determined by the number of people who see you or acknowledge you. It comes from a much deeper place, from the one who made you, who knows your heart, who loves you unconditionally. When you live for this approval, you are free to be yourself. You don't have to perform or pretend. You don't have to hide your flaws or chase perfection. You can rest in the reality that you are already enough. Living without the need for approval is not about becoming indifferent to others. It is about not being controlled by their opinions. It means you can listen to feedback without allowing it to define you. It means you can accept correction without losing your confidence. It means you can walk your path even when it doesn't align with popular opinion. This kind of freedom opens doors to true creativity, true growth, and true purpose. You begin to move in your unique calling without hesitation, without fear of rejection or ridicule. When you stop seeking approval, you also begin to protect your peace. You become more discerning about where you invest your energy, whom you trust, and how you respond to criticism. You learn to separate constructive feedback from destructive words. You develop a thick skin but a soft heart. You are not easily shaken by negative voices because your foundation is secure. This stability allows you to face challenges with courage and grace, knowing that your identity is not at stake. Moreover, letting go of the need for approval frees you to build authentic relationships. When you are not trying to impress or please, you attract people who appreciate you for who you truly are. You create space for genuine connection, rooted in honesty and vulnerability. This leads to deeper friendships, stronger communities, and a greater sense of belonging, not because you sought to be accepted, but because you are authentically yourself. There is also a spiritual dimension to this freedom. When you stop seeking approval from people, you open yourself to seek approval from God alone. You begin to live your life as an offering to Him, not as a performance for others. This shifts your focus from external validation to internal alignment. You ask, am I walking in truth? Am I following the path God has set for me? And this question becomes the guiding light that leads you through uncertainty, criticism, and even rejection. Breaking free from the need for approval is not always easy. It requires courage to stand alone, to face discomfort, and to resist the pull of conformity. But it is necessary for growth. It is necessary for freedom. It is necessary for the fulfillment of the unique purpose God has placed in your heart. When you live free from the chains of approval, you walk boldly into the life you were created to live, anchored in the truth that you are fully known, fully loved, and fully enough just as you are. There is a profound peace that comes when you learn to wait, not just to wait passively, but to wait actively with faith and expectancy. In a world that moves so fast, that demands immediate results and quick fixes, waiting can feel like weakness or failure. We want to see progress, to feel like we're moving forward, to have answers now. But God's timing is not our timing. His ways are higher than ours, and his delays are not denials. When you embrace waiting as part of your journey, you open yourself to a deeper trust, a more profound transformation than any quick success could bring. Waiting requires patience, and patience is a discipline of the soul. It means resisting the urge to take control, to force outcomes, or to rush ahead without guidance. It means surrendering your own timetable and submitting to God's perfect plan. This is hard because waiting often comes with uncertainty. You may not understand why the door is still closed, why prayers seem unanswered, why seasons feel long and lonely. But it is precisely in this uncertainty that your faith is refined. Like gold in the fire, your trust is purified and strengthened. Waiting becomes a sacred space where God teaches you reliance, humility, and endurance. When you wait with faith, you are not idle. You are actively preparing. You are growing in character, wisdom, and strength. You are learning to recognize God's voice more clearly, to discern His will more deeply, and to align your heart with His. Waiting is an invitation to deeper intimacy with God. It calls you to lean not on your own understanding but to find your confidence in His presence. You begin to see that waiting is not a gap in your story but a vital chapter of it. Often, waiting is accompanied by feelings of frustration, doubt, and fear. You may question whether God has forgotten you or if your prayers are unheard. But the truth is, God is never silent in your waiting. He is working behind the scenes, moving circumstances, softening hearts, and preparing the way for what is to come. Sometimes His silence is a way of protecting you from things you are not yet ready to face. Sometimes it is a call to deeper trust rather than immediate answers. The discipline of waiting also teaches you about hope. Hope is not wishful thinking. It is a confident expectation of good based on God's promises. When you wait with hope, you refuse to give up or give in to despair. You keep your eyes fixed on what God has said, not on your current reality. Hope anchors you in the storm, gives you strength when you feel weak, and lights the way when the path is dark. Waiting is also a time for preparation. You prepare your heart, your mind, and your spirit for the blessings ahead. You shed old habits, release what no longer serves you, and embrace the person God is shaping you to be. This preparation is essential because what God has for you requires a new level of readiness. You cannot step into your destiny carrying the baggage of the past or the impatience of the present. There is a beauty in the waiting, even when it is hard. It is a time when you learn to listen, to trust, and to be still. It is a time when your faith moves from what you see to what you believe. It is a season that, though often uncomfortable, is filled with grace and purpose. When you learn to wait well, you are not just surviving the in-between. You are thriving in it, growing stronger, deeper, and more rooted in the love of God. When you focus on yourself and embrace silence, you step into a sacred space where true transformation begins. It is in the quiet moments, away from the noise, the distractions, and the need for approval, that your soul is healed, your faith deepened, and your purpose clarified. Choosing stillness over reaction, patience over rush, and trust over fear allows you to grow strong in ways that the world cannot see but that God deeply honors. This journey is not always easy. It requires courage, discipline, and surrender. But as you learn to walk this path, you discover a peace that transcends circumstance, a strength rooted in truth, and a freedom that comes from living authentically in alignment with God's will. In focusing on yourself and staying silent, you watch life change, not because of what the world does, but because of what God is doing within you.